When I return to my home in St. Lucia, I can look back fondly and proudly on my 2 weeks in Paris and know that together with a group of hardworking and determined men and women, I helped create history. A history that will ensure that my island and our planet will have a more certain future. My country, St. Lucia, is very proud and pleased to associate itself with this historic Paris Agreement.
And that radical idea was 1.5 degrees, that we would actually get 1.5 degrees Celsius reflected in the text of the Paris Agreement. Nobody thought so. Everybody thought that the world had settled on 2 degrees Celsius. Understanding that we're facing a crisis, and unless we do something now, this crisis will get worse, and it'll get worse to unimaginable proportions. Once we've reached these tipping points and these things start to happen, then there really is almost no turning back. And it will not be the sort of thing that you will get vaccines from Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson to inoculate you against or to cause a reversal. Last year, for example, when as a result of the unprecedented shutdown in the global economy, we saw a record 7% reduction in global carbon emissions in 2020. That had absolutely zero impact on the temperature of our planet. So 2020 was actually tied for the warmest year on record. And if we look at the warmest years on record since we started measuring this in 1850, the 7 hottest years have been the last 7 years. But first in the Caribbean and in SIDS and in vulnerable countries, climate vulnerable countries, it's not an esoteric discussion. It's a life and death situation. I can walk you through parts of my country and show you how the ecosystem has changed so dramatically in the last 15 to 20 years. Well, the 2 degrees Celsius warming in St. Lucia shows the entire peninsula of Beaufort being cut off. So what is now Uwanora International Airport will be completely submerged. That's what the model is showing. So these things will cause serious changes to these countries, to the landscape of the country and to the lives of the people who live in these countries. When we went to Paris knowing that we had an entire region behind us. So we went into COP21 very well prepared. In fact, St. Lucia hosted a series of meetings in St. Lucia with the assistance of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, Climate Analytics, to really get our negotiators and our ministers on the same page, to understand what the issues were and to arrive at a common position. We also, St. Lucia was also part of something called the High Ambition Coalition, St. Lucia and the Marshall Islands. And this is something that was spearheaded by my friend, the late Tony DeBrun, the foreign minister of the Marshall Islands. And this High Ambition Coalition kind of grew in strength from meeting to meeting. We had our first meeting in Paris in July of 2015. That allowed us to get a grouping of countries together who were committed to an ambitious Paris Agreement. Society was mobilized and supported our cause. This is actually in one of the halls at Le Bourget. Caribbean Youth Environment Network, they came on board. They pushed this 1.5 to stay alive throughout all their chapters, and they were involved and committed all the way to Paris. Some of them actually came to Paris as members of the respective country delegations, and they were there attending the meetings and also networking in their own way. So our artists supported our work, and these are actually 2 of them, Aaron Silk of Jamaica and Martinez of Belize, who actually traveled up to Paris with us and made that Caribbean booth, that Caribbean pavilion at COP21, one of the most interesting, most visited booths, and allowed Caribbean people to hear about climate change from people other than the usual technocrats. Those were Caribbean people who were artists, journalists who were putting climate change in their own words and helping to get the message out. And I think that really helped to mobilize the Caribbean community in a manner that had never been done before. The other thing we did was we used the international media to tell our story to the world, and actually made a deliberate effort to speak to every international media house. And that was important because it helped us to get the international world to understand just how important these negotiations were to us. So really the big message is that the climate is changing. Are you? Are we? We've been changing slowly, but we need to change a lot more quickly. So I would like COP26 to be an action COP. We really must see at COP26 an understanding that time is running out. That, as WMO has said, as the World Meteorological Organization has said, in a few years' time, we'll touch 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, that doesn't mean we will stay and go and continue to rise. What happens now will determine whether we can keep that curve at 1.5 or whether we continue marching inexorably towards 2.6 or 3 degrees Celsius. So what can we do? Well, we have to intensify the diplomatic pressure on developed countries to dramatically curb their emissions of greenhouse gases. We have to actively encourage developed countries to increase financial support to climate vulnerable countries. We have to invest in adaptation interventions. Unfortunately, these adaptation interventions cost money, which is why mobilizing the funding is so important. We have to pay special attention to the needs of the most vulnerable because they're the ones being most impacted by climate change. Increase public awareness and education on climate change and its varied impacts. But we must continue to lead by example. It adds moral authority to our arguments and it is economically sound. And that's where RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, comes in, because all of our countries have established renewable energy targets, some much more ambitious than others. And that's even with them being minuscule contributors to global greenhouse gases. Have to continue making noise, continue preaching that, yes, we can do better, but also letting people know what they can do better. Decarbonization is as important for small island developing states, for economic grounds as it is for developed countries for climate change grounds. Because if you give us the means to increase our economic output, if you give us the means to improve our economic viability, then there's certain things that we can do for ourselves.